start. Go on. Thank you, Kislay, for joining us.
Thank you very much, Martha, for inviting me to speak to your students. And I can see around 19 people have joined. So, hello everyone. I don't speak Spanish. I'm very sorry for that. So, I will be talking to you in English. If whatever you don't understand, please let me know. I will repeat that. I will try to be as much clear as I can. And whatever is your questions, I would be happy to take that. So, I'd be basically speaking today on India-China disputes. So in my last moments, I've prepared some slides for you. I hope it won't be too long. So, let me start. Uh, Basically, when we talk about India-China disputes, the actual relations between India and China, they start from 1949. India got independence in 1947 from the Britishers, and after China got independent, or they formed a new government under the communist regime from 1949, then the story of India and China begins post-independence. So the topic of my presentation today is India-China disputes, then and now, means past and what is happening in present. So the relation between India and China has been going through ups and downs. If we see the financial and economic relations, we are having we import from China quite in a huge amount of goods from China, and uh, the imports from China account for around $70.3 billion, while we export to China in the range of $16.7 billion. So there is a huge trade deficit in favor of China. Now, basically, I'll not be talking about the financial and the trade issues today. I'll be talking about India-China disputes and international relations. So let us begin. The contents are the first one. I'll be talking about rise of Mao Zedong in China. The second topic would be expansionist policies of Mao, especially in regards to India. Then it would be disputed borders with India. Where and when did actually the border dispute between China and India started? The fourth topic would be occupation of Tibet and India's reaction over it, because Tibet and India used to share borders earlier, and when China occupied Tibet, we came directly in contact with China. So the fifth topic would be Sino-Indian relations post Tibet's occupation, and the last topic would be current day standoffs, means the conflicts between India and China at present. So let us begin. Very briefly, as you know, that the Chinese Civil War lasted from 1947 to 1949, and which led to exile of the nationalist leaders in China, then to Taiwan. They fled to Taiwan. So the communists then, because of the Civil War, developed a strong grassroots support at that particular point of time. They seized many weapons from Japanese, and they had superior military. So they were finally able to form their own government, and they renamed China from Republic of China to People's Republic of China, PRC, what we uh, see today. So please excuse me for the typo error in the slide. It should be ROC, not RO. So anyways, PRC got formed in 1949 by Mao, and here comes Mao into the Indian political arena as well. Now, when we talk about the expansionist policies of Mao Zedong in regards to India, we talk about the hand palm finger concept of Mao. So Mao once said that China is hand, Tibet is like the palm of China, and there are 5 fingers which we have to liberate. 5 fingers were namely Nepal, Arunachal Pradesh. Arunachal Pradesh is a state in India. Bhutan, it's a free country today. Ladakh, that is also a state in India, basically Union Territory of India in the northern part of India. And then comes Sikkim. Sikkim is a northeastern state of India. So these 5 countries and as well as Indian states, Mao claimed as his own. According to Mao, it belonged to them back in the medieval times. when China was like a big kingdom, a big central kingdom. There was this idea, this vague idea in minds of Mao, that since we were in past, we were having control over these areas, so in future as well we need to have control over these areas. And this expansionist policies of Mao, the hand palm finger concept, can be validated today when you see that China has subsequently developed border disputes with all of the 5 fingers mentioned over here in this slide. In case of Nepal, with a small country like Nepal, they have got border disputes at more than 10 places, although they are supporting Nepal financially in trade matters, and in other ways they are also supporting Nepal against India, and they are having a very good relation with Nepal. But at the same point of time, they are also having border disputes with Nepal, so at 10 places recently. Arunachal Pradesh is a state in India which they claim as their own, and they call it south of Tibet. Bhutan is a very small country, north of India. It's a Himalayan country, and right now they have also developed a border dispute with Bhutan. In the eastern region of Bhutan, there is a big forest, and China has now suddenly started claiming that big forest as its own. Ladakh, they have always been claiming Ladakh. Ladakh is a union territory state in the not to call it a state, now a newly formed union territory in the north part of India. And then we have got Sikkim, which is also a state of India. Now, I would like to show you this all these places in the map. So as you can see, there is a map of Tibet over here. You can see Ladakh on the western side, Nepal on the southern side of Tibet, and then there is a small state called Sikkim, and then Bhutan is a separate country, and then Arunachal Pradesh on the right side, that is a state which is under jurisdiction of India, and it belongs to India today. If you want to have a clearer picture, you can see this. This is a map of India. So if you can see my cursor, I don't know whether you can see it or not. So the red area is called Aksai Chin, and the area near this red area is called Ladakh. So China claims this area. Then China also talks about the Mao's expansionist policies, the finger, palm, and hand policy. They talk about Nepal as their not as their own, but they call that they have this responsibility of liberating Nepal. I don't know who they will liberate it from, but Nepal is there, and then this small place Sikkim and Bhutan, and this finally shaded area over here is Arunachal Pradesh, which lies with India today. Now coming over to the disputed borders with India. So in this regard, you have to remember 3 specific years: 1897, 1899, and 1914. So these 3 years, there were 3 border agreements, or you can say 3 lines were drawn by the then British Indian government, because India was under the occupation of Britain until 1947. So in 1897, there was a Ardagh-Johnson line which came into being, and then in 1899, Mccartney McDonald line, which China says that it is a legitimate line. I'll be explaining all these lines and meanings in the next slides, so you don't have to worry about that. In 1914, British India signed an agreement with Tibet as well as China, and finally the Chinese stepped out of it, but still the Britishers say that they signed it with China and Tibet. So this was a foul game by the British government. How? I will explain it in the slides further. So these 3 dates you have to remember when you talk about the border disputes with India, and many of the Indians even don't know about these 3 agreements which was signed between British Indian government and the then Chinese or the Tibetan government then. So if you know this, I'm sure you will be better than other Indians who don't know that. 90% of the Indians don't have much idea about these things. Now let us come to the Ardagh-Johnson line. So this this map which you are seeing on the screen right now, the red line from here, the red line which you can see, the red bold line from here to here, this line was Ardagh-Johnson line, and this line said that beyond this, north and west of it is China, and the shaded portion belongs to India. So this region is called Aksai Chin region. It is the disputed region right now. It belongs to India according to this line, Ardagh-Johnson line, which was formed in 1897 by the Britishers. What was it? So this line was in continuation of another map, which was formed by the Britishers. A guy named William H. Johnson from the Survey of India proposed a map in 1887, which was very close to this map. Now, in 1897, another British military officer by the name of Sir John Ardagh, he formed a new map, which I showed you just now. This map was used by both Britishers as well as Chinese for a long period of time. And why this map came into existence was because of a very interesting international phenomena which was going on at that particular point of time. It was called the Great Game. Basically, the increasing influence of the then USSR, its communist regime on other countries. So the Britishers saw that China is getting weak, and thus the USSR wants to have its influence on China. And since if China borders with India, then China may also have communist influence on India. So therefore, they wanted to create a buffer zone between India and China. And due to this buffer zone, they wanted to create a buffer zone between India and China, and this buffer zone was known as Tibet. So they basically wanted to distance India from China. So they were trying to in one way consolidate Tibet's existence as a separate country. Therefore, they drew this line, and they sent this map to China, which was accepted by many of the Chinese government authorities. China used this map from 1917 to 1933 in their postal atlas. Even Peking University, which exists even to date, which is located in Beijing, they use this. They also use this atlas, and in this atlas, Aksai region, this region was shown in India. So at that particular point of time, from 1917 to 1933, China has agreed to this map, but later on they said that they don't agree with this line. They don't agree with this map. While India kept saying that they only believe in this map. Why? We'll see it later on. Then comes the second line, the second map, Mccartney-McDonald line. So basically, Mccartney-McDonald line gave this region, this Aksai region, which I showed you in the last slide over here, the shaded region on the eastern side. This region under this new Mccartney-McDonald line was given to Chinese by the Britishers. Why they gave it? We'll see that in the next slide. But here you can see that this dotted line means that the region east of the dotted line, the eastern part of this dotted line, belongs to China. Earlier, under this Ardagh-Johnson line, it was in the Indian jurisdiction. So what happened that Chinese occupied Xinjiang. You might have heard the name of Xinjiang. There is another Chinese persecution going on in Xinjiang. They are, ill-treating, witch-hunting the Muslim population over there. So Chinese occupied Xinjiang in 1878, and they wanted to draw a new map. So they contacted Britishers. Then the British Consul General was Mccartney. So the China sent a new map to Mccartney, and Mccartney, along with his counterparts, decided that there should be a different map now. So British ceded Aksai, the region over here, the region east to the dotted line, as you can see in this slide. This region was ceded to Chinese Qing dynasty by then British envoy to China. His name was Sir Claude MacDonald, and they formed a new map and they sent to the Qing dynasty. But Qing government, to our surprise and to everyone's surprise, never replied. They never officially recognized that map. So Britishers thought that this map is by default, it is going to be rejected, and Britishers never used this map. Even China never used this map at that particular point of time. But suddenly today, China believes that it is the correct map. Are you able to listen to me? Is everything all right? Okay, I think everything is all right.
Yes, Yes,
Yeah.
yes, everything is going well. Si tienen alguna pregunta, les pido que por favor la escriban en el chat y luego cuando él termine su presentación, pues él les puede responder con más detalle. ¿Listo?
Okay.
Go on, Kislay.
Okay. Thank you. Yes. So you came to know about two of the maps which were drawn by Britishers and Chinese, and then it was accepted for some time by the Chinese. Then the another one was never recognized, even though the Chinese wanted that kind of map, but they never recognized it. No one knows why. Next comes the Shimla Agreement, or the Shimla Accord of 1914. This was signed by the Britishers, Tibetans, and the Chinese. So there were three parties involved in it. Since Indians were under Britishers, so it is considered that the British India and the British India, along with the Prince of Simla, signed this agreement with Tibetan and Chinese. So there was a Chinese counterpart in this agreement as well, Simla Agreement of 1914. This is very important agreement because India keeps citing this agreement, and China keeps saying that they don't believe in this. They don't recognize this agreement. So despite of China saying that they don't recognize this agreement was attended by Chinese delegate called Yuan Chen. His name was Yuan Chen, and he attended it, and he agreed to all the points of Simla Agreement. But later on, after he went home, Chinese government walked out of this agreement. They said that they don't agree to this accord anymore. So what was this accord all about? This accord was also in line with the last agreement which we have seen, the Ardagh-Johnson line. So this agreement divided the outer Tibet and inner Tibet into two parts, like this. If you can see the map over here, you can see Tibet over here and a dotted line which divides inner Tibet, this Amdo region, and the outer Tibet, this Utsang region over here, into two different parts. Why did they do it? They did it because, again, here is India. As you can see, India is here, Bhutan is here, another country, Nepal, another country. But they are all in line with India from here to here, and the Indian border extends further to west to Nepal. So this all is Indian border over here. So Britishers basically wanted to separate China from India so that India could be saved from the communist influence. As they said that the great game which we talk about, the increasing influence of USSR on China, and then they feared that this influence might come to India, which was their stronghold. So they were trying to separate China from India. So how could they do it? By consolidating Tibet as a separate country. So here is China, here is Tibet, and here is India and other states. So if they consolidate Tibet as a separate country, they can separate China from India. So the border would be here's Simla Agreement. So the border would be very far from the Chinese border would be very far from that of the Indian border. So this was their idea. So they divided Tibet into two parts, and they signed an agreement with Tibet. That this dotted line is a river called Chamdo River, and we'll see how this comes into play later on. So let us come back to our slide. So according to the Britishers, the outer Tibet was to be controlled by the Tibetan government. Outer Tibet means the Tibet which was bordering with India, and the inner Tibet, as China used to say that Tibet, the whole Tibet is a suzerainty of China. So Britishers said that the inner Tibet would be controlled by the Chinese government. But what they did not say to India was that they have agreed silently to the Chinese that Tibet is suzerainty of China. Why? Because in 1914, this agreement was signed in 1914, and Brits were in World War I during 1914, so they did not want to have a bad relation with China. So despite having this Shimla Agreement, Shimla Accord of 1914, where they apparently divided Tibet into two parts and signed an agreement, they readied the Tibetans, they readied the Prince of Simla, everything was okay, even Chinese Yuan Chen was okay. So it was all on papers. Actually, there was something other, some other thing going on exactly. So internally, British government agreed to China that Tibet is a suzerainty of China, and therefore China stepped out of this agreement later on. So this agreement became null and void because it was a three-party agreement, and one party has said that no, we don't agree to this agreement. So finally, it stands nowhere in the eyes of China. But India and British India then still used to say that this agreement has been finalized and Tibet has been divided into two parts. So this was basically a foul game by the Britishers. Now, coming back to now moving ahead to the occupation of Tibet and India's reactions. So as you know, that Tibet was in one way an autonomous region. It is true that there was some influence of China on Tibet, but for a long time, Tibet has been an autonomous region. Tibet had its own government. As you know, Dalai Lamas were there, several Dalai Lamas. So they were the head of the states in Tibet. But China said, after Mao Zedong came to power, China said that, no, Tibet is our land and we are going to take it back. So they finally occupied Tibet in 1950. They claimed it as liberation. So this was a kind of propaganda because they said we are liberating it from the Western imperial forces, from the influence of the Western imperial forces. So finally, they sent 40,000 strong troops to Tibet. They crossed the Chamdo River, and here where we saw this Amdo region, this is called Inner Tibet. So from here to here, 40,000 soldiers moved, crossing this dotted line. This dotted line is called Chamdo River. So they crossed this Chamdo River, and with the help of 40,000 soldiers, they occupied Tibet. They called it as they are liberating Tibet, and they signed a 17-point agreement with Tibet, and they promised that they will not destroy the culture of Tibet, and Tibetans have all the rights to protect their culture, to live as they have been living before. So Tibetans said, okay, it doesn't matter. They were peaceful people. They got carried away by the false promises of China. Later on, you will see in my slides that how China started persecuting Tibetans, how China started destroying their culture. There were self-immolations. There were another, extremist groups, groups of youngsters, youths that came into being in Tibet, and they were all fighting against this Chinese occupation. And still the fight is going on. How? We'll see it later on. Now, what was India's reaction? Since it was a big change of the game in the vicinity of India, in the neighborhood of India. So if your neighborhood gets affected, you get affected. This is the rule of international relations. So that is why countries pay a lot of attention on the neighbors. So here, a complete status quo change was happening in the neighborhood of India, in the north of India, and India was practically able to do nothing. Why? Because India had got independence in 1947, and this is the story of 1950. After 200 years of British rule, India became totally weak. We were not having food to eat. The per capita income of Indians were very low. There was practically no source of income for Indians. There were no foreign direct investments at that point of time. As you can understand, the world was ridden by Second World War and many other things which had made India weak. The Britishers had totally plundered India. They had totally looted India, and India was left with nothing much, not a strong military, not a, even the Constitution of India was made in 1950, and this all happened in 1950. So you can understand that a country which was 3 years old then did not have much strength, strategic as well as military, to fight with a strong country like China, which was under the communist regime, and they were already fighting a Korean War at that particular point of time. So if you remember, Korean War went from 1950 to 1953. So China was already in one war at that particular point of time, and then it also occupied Tibet. So you can understand the extent of their strength and power, their military power. They were, of course, more powerful than India at that particular point of time. So India said, and it was the principle of India, you must be knowing the name of Gandhi. Gandhi and the first Prime Minister of India, Jawaharlal Nehru, they were the prime figures who were responsible for liberating India, for the independence of India. Of course, there were others, uncountable number of freedom fighters who were fighting, but these two figures had their influence on the Indian politics at that particular point of time, and their ideology was in a way prevailing all over India. So Nehru and Gandhi, they were very peaceful people. They did not want a war. So following the Gandhian principles, our first Prime Minister, Jawaharlal Nehru, said that we don't want a war. We will try to solve it peacefully. We'll try to solve it diplomatically by talks. So he insisted that there should be, talks between India and China in regards to this Tibet issue. But the Chinese premier Zhao Enlai rejected it, and he said that it is an internal matter of China, and any other foreign influence would not be tolerated. He wrote it in a letter officially. So this was an official stance by China, about which India could do nothing later on. So in a way, you can say that India said that, okay, we can't do anything. No power in the world can stop China from snatching Tibet, from invading Tibet, from occupying Tibet. Even the United States could not do anything at that particular point of time, which was completely against a communist regime. So the people who expect India, in India or outside India, the people who expect that India should have done something, it was completely out of question. Even Jawaharlal Nehru had said, I can quote, he said that this can lead us to the Third World War, which we don't want at present. So now moving to the next slide. Sino-Indian relations post-Tibet's occupation. So in continuation with the same topic, I would like to tell you that in 1959, after 9 years of the occupation of Tibet, Chinese started their aggression in Tibet. They started doing the same, or even in a greater magnitude, what they are doing today in Xinjiang. They started destroying the cultural heritage of Tibet. They started destroying the culture of Tibet. They started persecuting the people, jailing, maiming, killing, witch hunting them. Tibetans were taken aback because they were not ready for this. Suddenly, Dalai Lama had to escape. The head of the state, the religious head of the state, he came to Jawaharlal Nehru, who was the first Prime Minister of India, and he asked for a political asylum, to which Nehru agreed. I would also like to inform you that before this, once more Dalai Lama had come to India for taking political asylum, because he was scared that China would either kill him, or if he is killed, then the Tibet is gone, because he was the head. So he had this moral responsibility of keep running his government either in Tibet or in exile. So exile meant that necessarily they are going to come to India to run their government. And to date, they are running their government, the Tibetan government, in exile. So their government is being run in India. So political asylum was given to Dalai Lama in 1959, and this was the turning point between India and China's relation. China said that this is a complete violation of the 5-point agreement. So about the 5-point agreement, I forgot to inform you. 5-point agreement was an agreement signed between India and China. It was called Panchsheel Agreement in Hindi language. Panchsheel means 5-point agreement in 1954. So it was basically a trade and relations agreement, and it was not a binding agreement. It was just a sort of memorandum of understanding, MOU. So under these agreements, there were 5 points which basically entailed peaceful relations, peaceful coexistence, and no interference of one country into another country's internal and domestic affairs. So this was the main point. But here, when India gave political asylum to Dalai Lama, China said that you are interfering in our internal issues. Dalai Lama is a separatist, and you have given him a political asylum. This means that you are against Panchsheel Agreement, or the 5-point agreement. So China ended this 5-point agreement. Let's come to another slide. When Tibet was being when Tibet was being occupied by the Chinese forces, there was an uproar in the Indian Parliament. The opposition was asking the incumbent, the Nehru government, to do something. To this, the foreign minister, Mr. M.C. Chagla, he said that war is not possible because India is not militarily strong to fight China. At that particular point of time, there was a fashion that the politicians were very honest. They would honestly say whatever is the status quo of the country. They were not hiding, they were not lying, but the status quo today is completely different. Politicians never say truth today. So anyways, so there is Assam Rifles in India. It is a part of Indian Army. It was sent after China invaded Tibet. We sent our forces to the border regions, which was bordered by Tibet. So because Indian policymakers, Indian politicians, they were afraid, they were scared that China, if China has invaded Tibet, they might invade India as well. So we sent Assam Rifles to safeguard our northeast frontier agencies. And then there is a region in the Andhra Pradesh called Tawang. Andhra Pradesh borders with Tibet, as I've informed you. So there is a region called Tawang. China says it. China claims this region as its own. So they say it as South Tibet. And then all these things happened. Political asylum was given. 5-point agreement was cancelled by China. And then China started building infrastructure in the north region of India. I will show you later on in the maps. You can see here in this map. Let me show you the map. Yeah, here. So this region, which China considers as its own, this region on the east, if you can see my cursor, the Mccartney McDonald line, China started building roads. So this is a big highway that China built, and this highway connected from Tibetan capital Lhasa to Xinjiang. So this was a very big highway built by China. So China has this strategy of developing infrastructure at the places which are disputed, which China considered disputed. China starts building the infrastructure to consolidate that place as their own. So China started building infrastructure. China built a road. And India was taken aback because India did not know that they are building a road in their own territory, which India considered as its own. So finally, it went under the control of China. That region was called Aksai, and it is still under the control of China. India came to know it through newspapers. I don't know whether it is true or it is false, but there is no government notification, or there is no formal notice by the Indian government that Indian government knew about the building of infrastructure in Aksai before 1957. Some people say that there were intelligence agencies who already knew about it, but Indian government says that no, we did not have any idea about China building infrastructure in that region before 1957. So India finally came to know it through a newspaper article that was published in China. And then came the 1962 Sino-Indian War. After India gave political asylum to Dalai Lama, Zhou Enlai, the Chinese premier, he thought that India would try to free Tibet, or they would try to do something against the interest of Chinese in Tibet. So finally, there was a war in 1962. It was a Sino-Indian War. India got defeated in that war because we were not prepared. It was a young country then, 15 years of independence, and India did not have much arms and ammunition. The army was weak. The armed personnel, they were not having winter clothes because the war was fought at 4,000 meters above the sea level. So it was very cold at that particular point of time. The temperature was in minus, and Indian soldiers, they lost. Many soldiers were killed. More than 1,300 soldiers were killed. Around 1,400, they disappeared. No one came to know about them, what happened to them. They were all killed, and many were wounded. More than 1,400 soldiers were wounded. So this was a very bad end of the war, where India lost it. And now, but after that, you have to see that after 1962 Sino-Indian War, there has been no bullet fired on the Indian-Chinese border, and it happened because of the confidence building measures, the agreements, the memorandum of understandings which was signed between India and the Chinese governments. In this meanwhile, there have been small skirmishes, small standoffs, eyeball to eyeball fights between soldiers, but no bullet has been fired till date. Now, the economic relation, the trade relations between India and China grew to an unprecedented scale. You can find many made in China products today in India. So at that level, if you see, the India-China relations was not bad. After 1962, it actually became very good. There were, of course, border disputes, but other things was running perfectly fine, and there was practically no, not a big threat of war like situation until that until April 2020. What happened in April 2020? There was a very bloody fight. There was a standoff between India and China in Galwan Valley, or what we call as Galwan Valley. Chinese soldiers in a huge number, they came to a region which they never claimed as their own. They invaded this region again, and they formed their tents. They established their tents. They established their permanent setups over there. Indian soldiers were also over there. There was eyeball to eyeball fight, and you will be amused to see that this is only these sorts of things are only happening between India and China. That soldiers, they fight with fist. They don't use guns, and they don't use other arms and ammunitions. They are sometimes fighting by fist, pushing each other, kicking each other, doing all these sorts of stuff. So this used to happen before also, but there was no bullet being fired. But what happened in July was that 20 Indian soldiers were killed by Chinese soldiers. So I'm talking about the current day standoff. I'm talking about the July 2020 situation. 20 Indian soldiers were killed, and reports are coming that Indians also killed around 32 Chinese soldiers in this Galwan Valley standoff. Now, the first point which you can see on my slide is 73-day long Doklam standoff. So I will explain it to you through my next slides that what was Doklam standoff. Doklam is a place. This slide is a bit blur. You can see in the next slide. Okay, so here is Nepal, here is Sikkim, and here is Bhutan. Here is China. This region, this is a small region. Chinese came with their soldiers, with their tents, with their arms and ammunition to this small region, and they were trying to claim this region as their own, which India objected, because India has got a very small, thin strategic points over here. As you can see, this red line over here. This area is a very thin, around 22 kilometers wide area, which connects India, the main Indian land, with this Indian part, this Meghalaya region, which you can see over here, where my cursor is, where I'm moving my cursor right now. So this region is a very sensitive region. If China comes into this region and later on it attacks onto this this chicken neck, we call it a chicken neck Siliguri corridor, as you can see it over here. If my slides are clearly visible to you, this region is a very narrow region. So if China invades this region, it will cut 7 states of India from the mainland. So this is a very crucial point for India. So there were 73 days long standoffs, fist to fist fight, eyeball to eyeball fights, and they were standing very close to each other, but no bullets was fired. And now also Chinese are over there. They're not going. I mean, they have moved back, but not completely. So the second one, which I talked to you right now, was Galwan Valley standoff. In Galwan Valley standoff, I will show you in my next slides. As you can see over here, this is Galwan Valley. In the red dot which you can see in the map is Galwan Valley. So Chinese have come from the eastern region to this region, and not only this region, but they are spread in around I think 200 to 300 kilometers from that region, in north as well as in south. So right now they have captured around 1200 square kilometers of Indian land, and India is in talks with China to solve this issue peacefully again, because both of the countries, they don't want to go into war at present. If you know, India and China both are nuclear countries, both have nuclear weapons. So any war, if it escalates to the nuclear war, it could be very dangerous, not only for these two countries, but for the whole world. A big chunk of population would be killed, ecosystem would be destroyed, and the war could be very bloody and deadly war. So both of the countries, they do not want to escalate. However, China keeps testing India. I will show you over here the next slide. this region, the region over here, if you can see my cursor, the northern part, Daulat Beg Oldi. This is the point where India has created an airport, and from this airport, this is a military airport, and from this airport to Shok over here, India has built a road, a highway, which China is opposing because they see it as an infrastructure development of India and a threat to the Chinese Aksai Chin region, this region, the region east to these 2 points. China has chosen this particular point of time because the world is, having a hard time due to Corona. India is having a hard time due to Corona, and they want to show the whole world and the Asian continent that they are the top dogs and they are the next hegemon. They are going to, push back America from the position of hegemony. They are the hegemons, and even, the country like India, which is a big military power today, it spends a lot on military, and now we are a strong country. So now poking India at this particular point of time, they want to show that if we can do it to India, we can do it to any other country in the world. India being a nuclear power, we are not scared of India, and we can do it to any other countries of the world. So there could be many reasons why China has why China is trying to enter into the Indian territory now, and it has been going since last 6 months. They are not ready to leave. They are every day they are saying that this is our land, that is our land, creating new disputes, and this is how they are giving a message to the whole world that they are going to be a top dog of this world. Now, thank you very much for my presentation.